I would like to thank the organizers of the 7th International Conference on Bioscience and Engineering for inviting me to give a speech, Wave Optics of Chromosomes, for the remote transfer of the bioholographic analog of aspirin. I am the author of the fundamental theory of wave optics in chromosomes as wave crystals, and the refraction code bioholography technology, and the founder and president of the American biotechnological company Wave Genome, LLC, founded in 2010. Current medical treatment, including chemical treatment via chemical pharmaceuticals, EMP treatments, mRNA technologies, and genetic engineering by cutting and pasting DNA snippets, do not take into consideration the structural damage in chromosomes. Excessive chemicals, electromagnetic fields, and homologous nucleotides break the precisely calibrated geometry of a chromosome. I will give you an example. In SARS-CoV-2 virus, all proteins are homologous to human proteins except for one. This homology made possible the interspecies jump of the virus from animals to humans, which is impossible in nature. So this virus was the product of the gain-of-function research, and it is the binary biological weapon, meaning that this virus has two viruses inside. It is a respiratory animal virus with 4 HIV inserts in its spike protein. And because this virus has all its proteins homologous to human proteins except for one, it is basically HIV virus, virus of human immunodeficiency. And why HIV? Because when it inserts itself into human RNA and DNA due to homology, our immune system attacks itself trying to get rid of these superfluous nucleotides which destroy the structure of chromosomes. And while attacking itself, immune system destroys itself, T lymphocytes, and we get all kinds of first autoimmune reactions, cytokine storm, and antibody enhanced response, and pathogenic priming. And when immune system destroys itself, we get acquired syndrome of immunodeficiency, AIDS. That's why any mRNA therapy, either as a vaccine or as anti-cancer therapy, is basically the destruction of the structure of the chromosome, which is supposed to have the precise number of nucleotides, no more and no less. So precise geometry. And the same concerns electromagnetic fields, because the world is 93% energy and 7% particles. And all this argument, whether this SARS-CoV-2 is a virus or it is some kind of 5G or 6G electromagnetic pulse radiation from the mobile phone towers, is irrelevant, because any virus is, for 93%, it is a waveform. The argument whether this virus was isolated or not isolated also is pointless, because any mRNA virus is HIV virus, because it is completely homologous to humans, and every human has his own version of this virus. And this virus is precisely represented in the electromagnetic form and scale of waveform, in a wave interference form. Excessive electromagnetic fields will destroy the electromagnetic structure of the chromosome, which is supposed to have precisely calibrated geometry, which is, as I argue in my fundamental theory of wave optics and chromosomes, wave optics. The same concerns excessive chemicals. Genetically modified organisms in the form of food causes cancer and sterility, and eventually causes prion disease, as the extreme form of encephalopathy. The same is true of the highly processed food. And the same is true of the insect food, which is analogous to the highly processed food. What does this mean? This means that both the genetically modified food and insect food represent nucleotides in the highly incoherent structure. So these incoherent crystalline structures are easily dissolved into incoherent nucleotides, which are easily incorporated into your RNA in DNA, destroying the structure of the chromosome. And the structure of the chromosome determines how your cell divides. If the structure of the chromosomes is destroyed, your cell divides incorrectly. And you get all the kinds of degenerative diseases, cancer, autoimmune reactions, organ failure in any part of your body, which happened with SARS-CoV-2. And eventually you get encephalitis or encephalopathy in the extreme form, prion disease. Prion disease is when your proteins lose their crystalline structure. It becomes like a sponge. And the first case of mass prion disease was in England in 2000s, in the end of 1990s. And it was caused precisely by the fact that British were feeding their cattle with the bones and meat of the same cattle ground into powder. And this is the effect of the destructive RNA interference. Nobel Prize to Andrew Fire and Craig Mello, 2006. They took RNA from the C. elegans worm and fed it back to the worm, and the worm died because the nucleotides were superfluous, extra nucleotides, and these extra nucleotides, superfluous nucleotides, had destroyed the precisely calibrated geometry of the chromosome. This means that any kind of insertion of superfluous nucleotides via blood transfusion. Peter Thiel, we know, is infusing himself with the blood of a teenager. So any blood transfusion, cannibalism in the form of pure cannibalism, Kuru disease of the Australian Aboriginals, ritual cannibalism as consumption of sacrificial human blood, incest, homosexuality as sexual pairing of two close sex partners, consumption of pork, which has the nucleotides very close to human nucleotides, casual sex, which is excessive sex with multiple partners, which accounts to the consumption of extra load of superfluous nucleotides, or excessive sex in a monogamous heterosexual relationship, which is supposed to be limited by religious practices and childbirth. Any excessive nucleotides destroy the structure of chromosomes, and structural damage of chromosomes is the major cause for disease. And extreme cases of the structural damage in chromosomes are turbo cancer. We see now in young people, even in children, cancers that we did not see before. And right now, various kinds of therapies are offered precisely for turbo cancer. President Donald Trump, in his day of inauguration, presented his new program of mRNA anti-cancer treatments, which, as I argue, will lead even to more cases of cancer and ultimately to sterilization of the American and global population and to zombie apocalypse. I was actually the first scientist who linked this idea of zombie apocalypse with the prion disease. In February 2021, Dr. J. Bart Klassen had published a seminal paper about mRNA vaccines causing prion disease. And prion disease is the extreme failure of social structure, zombie apocalypse. The other option that is offered right now is the replication of T lymphocytes, which basically the same thing, similar to blood transfusion, which is helpful for short term, but eventually causes cancer. So eventually causes the structural damage in chromosomes and cannot be used on a regular basis and cannot be considered as a panacea for heavy degenerative diseases. Only in the case of war, blood loss, I would say. So extreme cases of the structural damage in chromosomes leads to turbo cancer, AIDS, sterilization, and prion disease as the ultimate case of encephalopathy. If we continue the same path of medicine and pharmaceuticals as we are right now, we will bring our society to the complete total collapse. Everybody will be infected with AIDS. Everybody will be proceeding all the way to the prion disease, losing one's mind. So if you remember this mad cow disease in Britain, it demonstrated total loss of self-consciousness, mind, intellectual ability by a cattle which was fed with its own meat. Thus, the urgent task of the biological science and technology is to address the issue of the structural damage in chromosomes. The task includes the necessity of creating the fundamental theory of how the structure of chromosomes operates, and a biotechnology that corrects and enhances the structure of chromosomes. I will introduce my fundamental theory of wave optics in chromosomes and the biotechnology of bioholography for the correction of the structural damage in chromosomes. Specifically, I introduced the theoretical and technological paradigm of the remote transfer of the bioholographic aspirin analog, including the results of the clinical trials conducted by my company, Wave Genome LLC, at the Moscow State Bauman Technical University in 2017. Moscow State Bauman University is the major and the largest science university in Russia of MIT level. And the experiments and clinical trials were conducting using the newly invented non-optical laser. And the mathematical model for the aspirin, holographic aspirin, was created by the same mathematicians who created the trajectory mathematical model for the new Russian middle-range missile caliber. The point of this experiment and clinical trials was that the transfer of the pharmaceuticals was done not by electromagnetic signals, but via zero signal of the bioholography. So it was the first in the world, first in the history of science, bioholographic transfer of the pharmaceuticals. I would explain the significance of this transfer in comparison to the electromagnetic transfer. The bioholographic analog of aspirin was chosen on purpose since it provides an easier, verifiable model of clinical trials for wave genomes bioholography. But I would like to stress that the bioholographic pharmaceuticals function holistically, meaning that any bioholographic pharmaceutical would improve remotely and instantaneously the structure of chromosome in every organ and in the brain also, which was actually proven by this experiment in clinical trials also. Aspirin clinical trials had verified and confirmed my fundamental theory of wave optics in chromosomes. Since 2017, I have conducted other successful experiments, and before 2017, with the application of Wave Genomes LLC bioholography to other healthy conditions such as the hematoma, neurodermatitis, melanoma, and others. For example, the melanoma mole, when the applicator coded by laser on nano level with the biohologram of the client, when this applicator, electric-based applicator, was applied to the melanoma mole dried up and fell off within 3 days. I have created my fundamental theory of wave optics in chromosomes based upon my theory of wave crystals, which I had created in 1985, long before anybody else in the field of bioholography. Bioholography of chromosomes was introduced by Dr. Miller in his seminal paper, which was a high priority classified document of the United States government, till the bioholographic research had started in Russia, in pre-perestroika and post-perestroika Russia. So I'm not a pioneer of the bioholography of chromosomes, but Dr. Miller did not create, in my opinion, an adequate theory for the bioholography of chromosomes. For example, he offered the concept of nuts, but nuts, in my opinion, are the metaphor. Nuts do not explain how the chromosome functions based upon the fact that the world is 93% energy and 7% particles. nuts is not the physical process. That's why Dr. Miller and Peter Garyaev in Russia, they used very vague physical terms such as solid tones and wide electromagnetic spectrum. And I would like to stress that my theory is based not upon electromagnetic pulse energy, but on zero signal of the zero field, on scalar waves, which annul any signal, any linear finite signal, when the peak of the forward-going wave is annulled by the trough of the same wave when the wave is deflected back upon itself, like this. Number 8, no electromagnetic signal and no wide electromagnetic spectrum can explain how the zero signal of the zero field functions. And as I said, I had created the theory of wave crystals in 1985. And nobody was able to incorporate this idea because it is so innovative. It is really innovative idea in the field of physics based upon quantum physics and application of quantum physics to biology. My theory of wave crystals is theory of everything and applies to any and every field of science. This theory states that the life-sustaining information is non-local in time and space and is transmitted not via linear finite signals of electromagnetic nature, but remotely and instantaneously via refraction in the wave crystals. Electromagnetic signals cannot grasp, cannot explain, and cannot operate within quantum non-locality, which has no space and no time, and has the infinity and eternity and simultaneity of dimensions. Wave crystals have one and only focus of the quantum non-locality, the zero field, the zero center of the zero field, with this zero center being one and the same for chromosome and galaxy. This is also a completely new idea, and I came to this idea a priori, meaning via deduction, via self-sufficient assumption. But in nature, you can actually contemplate this principle. If you go to the lake and contemplate the sun, you see the line of light going straight to your eyes from the sun, right? But if a person next to you looks the same direction, he looks at the lake with the sun above the lake, he also sees this line of light coming straight to his eyes. So we see, both of us, me and this person, we see the same picture, the same lake, the same sun, but we have the light from the sun going directly straight to our eyes in a unique way, you see? Though it is the same lake, the same sun, the same day, the same point in time and space. Instead of the term quantum entanglement, I have offered the term refraction entanglement. And in my opinion, quantum entanglement is a very vague physical term, the same as the solid tones, wide electromagnetic spectrum, the same as the word quantum. So refraction entanglement is a very precise scientific term, the same as, by the way, wave crystals. Wave crystal is a hologram, non-local in time and space, in such a way that the universe is entirely in its every matrix point. This is the holographic principle. And this holographic principle was known for millennia from the ancients. The unity of macrocosm and microcosm. Even Leonardo da Vinci was writing in his notebooks that the light is contained entirely in every particle of light. So he was talking not about this light that Einstein was talking about, with a finite speed of light, completely different light. So the hologram is a specific quality of a signal, so that the holographic signal contains an infinite number of frequencies, particles, and fields. This is also a completely new understanding. The holographic signal is non-local. That's why it has the infinite number of electromagnetic signals, the infinite number of particles, the infinite number of fields. And we cannot describe the holographic signal just by each one of them separately or by the sets of finite signals, because the signal itself, the holographic signal, is infinite. In 2012, I have formulated the implication of the holographic principle. If the being is entirely in its every matrix point, this means that every matrix point is not simply different from any other matrix point, but is unique. Therefore, every matrix is both non-local and unique. So each one of us is not a biological computer, you see, like Elon Musk would like to think when he says that humans have feline brains in comparison with machines. Machines are finite, they are created, that's why they are finite. Machines would never be able to grasp infinity. Vice versa, the contrary, we humans are infinite, eternal souls. This was our knowledge from the times immemorial. No Elon Musk would be able to erase this understanding from our minds. If anybody would erase this from the mind of a human being, it would transform this human being into the animal. So animals, they are not capable of grasping infinity and eternity, while humans are. And Aristotle discerned between animals and humans precisely by the fact that humans were able to grasp infinity and eternity, and animals were not able to grasp infinity and eternity. And my contribution to this understanding lies precisely in the formulation that infinity of our souls consists in the uniqueness. So the more unique we are, the more infinite we are. The more infinite we are, the more unique we are. So we are both non-local and unique, each one of us. We exist in parallel to each other. That's why there is some limit in transmission of morphological information between us, between species, and any other information between even human individuals. And with two exact copies of the same wave matrix, we can transmit information between these two copies remotely and instantaneously, because in the quantum non-locality, they constitute one and the same systematic whole. Because in the quantum non-locality, there is no time and space. This is the foundation for the remote management of biosystems. I would like to emphasize that in Russia, at the end of 1990s, these facts became empirical evidence. Insulin was remotely transmitted upon the diabetic calf in the end of 1990s for the American Diabetic Association, before Peter Garyaev did this in Canada in 2002 with Bernstein and Tertishny. I have applied my fundamental theory of chromosomal wave optics to the research and development in the field of bioholography from 2010. My company is developing various kinds of products as the generators of the form for scalar wave diffraction gratings, for creating specific wave optics, for correcting the chromosomal structure of clients, large size and small size generators of the form. My company is doing research and development, production and marketing of these products, such as digital bioholographic pharmacies. And my company was the first company in the world which produced bioholographic pharmacies, not pharmacies based upon frequencies, but precisely upon the zero signal. The remote management of biosystems via laser signal, and the large size and small size generators of the form for administering these bioholographic pharmacies. These generators of the form include electrode-based wearables, applicators, aka generators, side generators, large-size medical beds, and helmets. I was the first science to produce the electrode-based applicators, aka side generators, as being coded by the individual human wave matrix. Before my company in Russia, scientists were coding different materials with the help of electromagnetic waves, and they were coding these materials with various kinds of supplements and pharmaceuticals. My company was the first company in the world, so the first company in the history of science and technology to code electrodes with the individual human wave matrices. Then my company was the first to treat these wave matrices as bioholograms. So we did not use electromagnetic signals, we used precisely bioholograms. And we coded these electrodes with lasers. So before my company, nobody coded electrodes with lasers. So nobody were creating any kind of pharmaceuticals with lasers, transmitting these pharmaceuticals remotely over the large and close distances, and nobody were using electrodes in such a way. The electrodes are polymer crystals which hold the crystalline structure, so they're crystals. Tetrapole crystals, not dipoles. So they are tetrapoles. Tetrapoles precisely means that they produce scalar wave. Forward-going wave has two poles, and then when it is reflected back upon itself, it has another two poles. So 4 poles, tetrapoles. These materials hold their own statical electricity and their own statical magnetism. So separate from any kind of electromagnetic fields, separate from the north-south magnetism of the planet Earth. These electrodes can be encoded with laser on nano level with bioholograms when they pass from the liquid crystal media to the solid crystal media. And our ancestors used the electrodes for millennia. They used the electrodes in the liquid crystal form, essential oils. That's why we have the notion to anoint for the kingdom, anointed king, anointing the head of the king with the essential oil of frankincense. Then our ancestors used electrodes in the aerosol crystal form. That's why we burn incense in churches even till now. And our ancestors used electrodes in the solid crystal form. That's why before the 1917 Bolshevik Revolution in Russia, every Russian was wearing the solid resin of frankincense in the silver egg, which was called ladanka, and frankincense is ladan in Russian. And our famous surgeon Pirogov, during the Crimean War, when British and French attacked Russian Crimea, he said that you can conduct open surgeries in a 5-meter radius from Crimean juniper without antiseptics, because Crimean juniper disinfects air in the diameter of 10 meters. And our Russian empress, the wife of last emperor Nicholas II in Crimea, got healed from tuberculosis walking among Crimean pines and junipers. This is the power of electrodes, and all the natural folk medicine, Ayurvedic medicine is based upon electrodes. That's why Judy Mikovits tells you to use essential oils. She unfortunately does not explain why. So that's why. Because essential oils are electrodes which produce scalar wave, which are now the waveforms of bacterial viruses, because the world is 93% energy and 7% particles. So viruses and bacteria exist in the wave form. Application of electrodes was used by our ancestors for millennia. So my company didn't invent electrodes. So our ancestors were using them for millennia, but my company just brought this ancient technology to the new level. And during Black Plague in Europe in the 14th century, thieves were able to rob the houses of the people killed by Black Plague because they were anointing themselves with 5 oils. One of them was frankincense. Another product by my company is medbed, Ras sarcophagus, and it is the only medical bed on the market which is based upon bioholography and is operated by green laser. And my company was the first company, by the way, in the world, which in 2010 brought medical beds to the world markets. Now we have the entire craze of the market about medical bed. But my company was the first company which brought this medical beds to the global market. So this is one of my medical beds, which consists of 2 concave lenses with mirror, fragmented mirrors, green laser, but I use both red and green lasers. The first concave lens, in the focus of this lens, there is the head of the client lying on the bed, and in the focus of the second concave lens is the focus of the green laser. What we have the immediate remote instantaneous transmission of the scalar wave diffraction grating from one lens to another lens, because they're calibrated exactly the same. So according to my formulation of the implication of the holographic principle, 2 exact generators of the form transmit information between each other remotely and instantaneously, because in the quantum locality they constitute one and the same systematic whole. This is the other product by my company, which is Ra helmet, also the generator of the form of the scalar wave diffraction grating. My company, again, was the first company to release digital pharmacies that are based not upon electromagnetic signals, electromagnetic pulse signals, but upon the zero signal produced by the laser-originated scalar wave. Why laser? Because only laser produces a coherent signal. And coherent signal means that this is the signal, the wave, which preserves its frequency constant. So if you want to treat turbo cancer, which is the structural damage you see in chromosomes, prion disease, sterility, you need to use the instrument which first operates on the 93% of what we are, on waves, not on particles, which are only 7% of what we are. And also this device should operate on the coherent structure, and this is only laser. So no electromagnetic pulse, infrared therapy light, you know, this craze in Great Britain, everybody using infrared therapy. This is all useless, you see. Only laser can produce the coherent signal, the scalar wave, and only by modulating the scalar wave diffraction grating, you can actually correct as a lens, applying this lens to your body, you can correct any kind of structural damage in your body. I have also created the concept of the scalar wave capacitor. The structure of chromosomes is based upon wave optics, and chromosome is the lens which corrects, focuses the genetic information. The same gene gets expressed in monkeys via acrocentric chromosome and in humans via metacentric chromosome. And acrocentric chromosome is literally half of the metacentric chromosome. It lacks symmetry. Woman has her gender chromosome metacentric, that's why she is capable of childbirth, and males have the chromosome acrocentric, gender chromosome. That's why males are not capable of childbirth. And only my theory of wave optics in chromosomes can explain why the structural damage in chromosomes leads to sterility. You can get acquainted with the results of the clinical trials in my paper. I would like to show you the picture of the scalar wave, and this is the scaling of the scalar wave. If the signal, coherent signal, is long enough, there happens the scaling of the scalar wave, and every segment of the scalar wave itself becomes a scalar wave from macro to micro dimensions ad infinitum. This explains the ability of the scalar wave diffraction gratings to transmit information remotely and instantaneously. Thank you very much for your attention.